Zeal Education Society, redefining excellence.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sriharsh Naggoda, pursuing Diploma in Electrical Engineering at Zeal Polytechnic. Today, me and my group are going to give a presentation on the topic Smart Grid. So, in this slide, we are going to see all the contents we are going to study in this presentation. So, we are going to study about information on electrical grid, what is a smart grid, components of an electrical smart grid, important functions of smart grid, features, advantages, disadvantages, and references. This presentation. So, in this slide, we are going to learn about electrical grid. What is an electrical grid? As it says, an electrical grid is an interconnected network for delivery of electricity from producers to consumers. Also, grids vary in size and can cover large areas. In the next slide, we are going to learn about smart grid. So, what is smart grid? In the earlier slide, we saw what an electrical grid is. In the same way, a smart grid is smart as compared to the traditional electrical grid. It detects changes in power usage and reacts automatically without any need of worker. In this slide, I have shown a picture of the smart grid. You can have a look. In the next slide, here we are going to learn about some components of an electrical smart grid. So, as it says, these are some of the electrical smart grid components. They are generation, transmission, substations, electrical power distribution, frequency, voltage, demand, capacity, and firm capacity. So, in this slide, we saw all the components of an electrical smart grid. In the next slide, here we are going to learn about some important functions of the smart grid. Here we can see there are 6 key priority functionalities of the smart grid. They are advanced metering infrastructure, demand response, electric vehicles, wide area situational awareness, distributed energy resources and storage, distribution grid management. So here in this slide we saw 6 main key priority functionalities of the smart grid. Here in the next slide, we are going to learn about some features of the smart grid. We can see 5 main features of the smart grid. They are reliability, flexibility in network topology, efficiency, sustainability, and market enabling. In this slide, we are going to learn about the first main important point, that is reliability. So, what is reliability? Reliability is one of the main points which will make use of some technologies and ensure more reliable supply of electricity and reduced vulnerability to natural attacks. The smart grid makes use of technologies such as state estimation that improve fault detection and allow self-healing of the network without the intervention of technicians. So in this slide, we saw how smart grid is reliable, more reliable we can say, than the normal traditional grid. In the next slide, we are going to learn about flexibility in network topology. This is second main point which we consider if we compare smart grid and traditional electric grid. So, flexibility in network topology means the ability to adapt changes. Next generation transmissions and distributions infrastructure will be more flexible. That is, they can adapt to changes frequently than the one they are operating right now. So in this slide, we learned the second main point, that is flexibility in network topology. In the next slide, we are going to learn about the third main point, that is efficiency. So, Numerous contributions to overall improvement of efficiency of energy infrastructure are anticipated from the deployment of smart grid technology, in particular including demand-side management, for example, turning off air conditioners during short-term spikes in electricity price, reducing the voltage when possible on distribution lines at the way-back machine through voltage optimization, eliminating truck rolls for meter reading. So in this slide, we saw a third main point, that is efficiency. What does it say? That if we compare smart grid with the normal grid, then the smart grid help bring more efficiency, in particular including demand side management. We can take an example as we saw of turning off air conditioners during short-term spikes in electricity price. So now let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to learn about the fourth main point, that is sustainability. In this slide, we are going to see another important point, sustainability. Normal electrical grids offer less sustainability. The new smart grids are more sustainable as compared to the normal electric grid. The traditional ones are less sustainable. So nowadays, we can see that smart grids are more in use than the normal ones, the traditional grids. The improved flexibility of smart grid permits great penetration of highly variable renewable energy resources such as solar power and wind power, even without the addition of energy storage. Smart grid technology is a necessary condition for very large amounts of renewable energy electricity on the grid for this reason. So now let's move on to the next slide. In the next slide, here we are going to learn about the last main point, that is market enabling. If we compare normal electrical grid with smart grid, the communication between suppliers and consumers have a systematic communication due to smart grid. It also permits both suppliers and consumers to be more flexible. So in this point, we can see if we compare traditional electrical grid with smart grid, if we compare traditional electrical grid with smart grid, then we can see that the smart grid allows more systematic communication between suppliers and consumers and permits both suppliers and consumers to be more flexible and sophisticated in their operation strategies. So generators with greater flexibility will be able to sell energy strategically for maximum profit, whereas inflexible generators such as base load, steam turbines, and wind turbines will receive a varying tariff based on the level of demand and the status of the other generators currently operating. So we saw an example here of market enabling. So now let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to learn about some advantages of smart grids. Here we can see that energy savings through reducing consumptions, better customer service and more accurate bills, fraud detection and technical losses, reduced balancing cost, increased competition, leveling of the demand curve, peak reduction, that what we say, reduction of carbon emissions. So these are some of the main advantages of using smart grid. You can have a look. So let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to learn about some disadvantages of smart grid. With some advantages, there also comes some disadvantages of smart grid. So continuous communication network should be available. During emergency situation, network congestion or performance are big challenges in smart grid system. Cellular network providers do not provide guaranteed service in abnormal situations such as windstorm, heavy rain, and lightning conditions. Some smart meters can be hacked, which can be used to increase or decrease the demand for power. It is expensive to install smart meter compared to traditional old electricity meter. So here we saw some disadvantages of using a smart grid. In the next slide here, I have provided with some of the references I have used for making this presentation. So we have come to the end of this presentation. and I hope you understood some basic information about the smart grid. I hope you like this presentation. Thank you.
Zeal Education Society, redefining excellence.